episode of Ordinary Gentlemen. I'm Anton, Beetge. Excuse the attire today. I'm at work. I haven't had a chance to record at home this week. And obviously, with COVID going on, it requires a whole lot of other personal protective equipment. And so, this is what I look like at the moment. And if I take this cap off, I'm not going to be presentable. So, we'll keep it on for now. But what I'd like to talk about briefly today is just my whole approach to focusing on what needs to be done and then getting tasks done one at a time. And this might not be applicable for everyone, so I'd be keen to hear how you approach these sort of things in your own life. But personally, what I would like to teach my own children is going to be don't multitask, plan things out, and then do things one at a time. So I want to focus, I want to plan, focus, and then knock tasks off one at a time. So you need to decide what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and then you need to get it done. And I think just two scripture verses that are motivating me. No, this is not the primary focus, I think, of what these passages are teaching, but I do think that these are implications which can be drawn from these passages. So the first is Matthew 6:34, which says, "Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." And what I'm taking from that is just the principle that we're not equipped to deal with the future all at once. We can't deal with the whole month, the whole week ahead. God's given us grace for each day, and I think that can be extrapolated out to grace for each task. So don't try and tackle the entire day all at once, just do the next thing. Okay, then the second passage that I have is Ecclesiastes 9 verse 10, which says, "Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might." And I don't think that you can be doing it with all your might if you are only giving it half your attention. So this speaks to both quality, doing things well, but then also doing things one at a time. I think, certainly for me, doing things one at a time rather than multiple things together is the only way I'm going to do things well. And we'll speak a bit more about that just now. But I think one of the problems that we can face when we have a whole lot to do at once is just the trap of planning indefinitely. So you see a whole big task and you get so caught up in the planning that you never actually get around to the doing. I think we've all experienced that when it comes to studying, that you can plan out your studying so carefully that at the end of the day you don't actually get around to studying. And I think as men we need to be careful of this. This is a very clever ploy that our flesh has to accommodate our laziness. We are tempted to be lazy, and so we don't want to avoid work by constant planning. Planning is important, but planning leads to work. So don't plan forever. Don't try and do everything at once. So don't put off the planning and just tackle everything all at once. And one of the biggest ways that I find I'm tempted to do this nowadays is through digital media. So I've got my cell phone, I'm busy trying to do something, and then I get a message or I get an email or I get a phone call, and I want to attend to that straight away. Worse, I get a social media notification and I want to attend to that straight away. So don't try and do it all at once. Don't try to multitask. Really, I think that my definition of multitasking is doing multiple things poorly. I don't think multitasking is a thing, but you might be different. I'm quite a simple guy. I'm pretty slow thinking. I can't multitask. It's something I've just come to accept. Don't allow the urgent to crowd out the important. And the way this is going to happen is through lack of planning. If you don't plan ahead in order to get things done timeously, if you don't manage your time well, the urgent things are going to become the things that you have to do right now, and that's going to mean that the important things get shoved to the side. So do plan, do think ahead, do make sure that you manage your time well. Don't just give in to your impulses and what you feel like doing right here and now. Try to plan ahead and then get things done in advance so that you aren't landing up having to put out fires or like those games where you're trying to just whack the things on their head that are coming up, and they eventually get too quick for you to do. So that's a big problem again for men, is just this time management. Don't just do what you feel like doing, because if you put off things forever, eventually they're going to become absolutely urgent, and then you're gonna leave out the things that really need to be done but are not as urgent. Um, yeah, as I said already, my definition of multitasking is just doing multiple things poorly. For me, that's how it works out. You might disagree with me, but this is what I'm going to be teaching my kids. Don't multitask. But there are certain things that you can multitask, and I think those are pretty self-explanatory. There's some very mindless tasks that we need to do. Washing the dishes doesn't require a whole lot of brain work. Driving a car doesn't require a whole lot of constant thinking. Now, yes, even with driving a car, the research shows quite clearly that people who are speaking on their cell phones while they're driving their cars are more likely to have an accident because they're not concentrating. So even there, it does play in. But I think it is a task which requires less executive function right there and then. So there are certain things. I think you can definitely drive and listen to something. Maybe you're driving, listening to me right now. Don't crash. Um, you can wash the dishes and listen to something. You can perhaps listen to music while you read. You could memorize something while you're out exercising. Those sort of things, definitely multitasking can be done. But I think anything that requires any sort of concentration, any sort of brain power, multitasking is a bad idea. You're just going to land up doing both tasks poorly. Just I had a quick glance through Google Scholar. I did a quick search on some research on multitasking, and I didn't go into the papers in great detail, but I just thought it would be interesting to find out, is this just something that I think is a bad idea, or is this actually something that the research backs up as being a bad idea? And I found a few studies. The one was by a guy called Sanbonmatsu et al. In 2013. He said that they found that people often engage in multitasking because they're less able to block out distractions and focus on a singular task, which is interesting. Again, goes back to laziness and maybe a lack of self-control. Wood et al. In 2012 spoke about the impact of multitasking with technology on real-time classroom learning, and they found that consistently participants who did not use any form of technology during class time, they were having a look at the use of Facebook and MSN Messenger back in the day, while in a lecture, they found that those who didn't use those things consistently outperformed those who did. Stutt et al. In 2013 asked the question, are women better at multitasking than men? They said it's been assumed, and yet no one had actually done any research. And the answer is yes, women are better at multitasking than men. So once again, men, leave it to the woman. Don't try and multitask. Borst et al. In 2010 had a look at what they called the problem state. And this is kind of getting back to what I was talking about. What can we multitask with? And anything that requires solving a problem, which is what I understood from problem state. I'm sure it has a more technical definition than that. But they found that there's a cognitive bottleneck in multitasking, which means that actually what you'll end up doing is you'll end up giving attention to one task at a time, but you just flip between tasks very often. And the problem with that is that you'll end up not getting into a flow state, for lack of a better word. You don't actually get into the tasks that you need to do. You'll end up giving a superficial attention to these things because your attention is flicking between tasks so quickly. So there's a cognitive bottleneck that happens in multitasking. So that was just a few papers that I had a look at just briefly, just to see whether or not I'm on the right track. And I think I'm on the right track. yeah, I think different people do approach these things differently. Certain people are probably better at multitasking than others. I just know I'm not. And I think that it would be safe to say that everyone is better at doing one thing at a time and giving your full attention to it than trying to split your attention among multiple things. Having said that, there is also a lot of research that's gone into when we do tasks, how long should we be giving our attention to them and how often should we be taking breaks. I'm not going to speak to that now, but single tasking and getting things done, I think does not mean that you necessarily have to sit and do one task for 3 hours at a time. But I think it is best to give yourself to one activity at a time. And yeah, I'd be interested to hear your own experience with multitasking, whether or not you found it to be helpful or unhelpful. And you can send through comments to justordinarygentleman@gmail.com. So justordinarygentleman@gmail.com. So yeah, I just thought this was an important thing because I think this is an area where men often fall off the bus, where we land up not giving our attention to things we ought to be giving our attention to, where we find life is just crowding out our good intentions to get important things done, which we've decided beforehand are important, but then it's just like life happens. Also, just in terms of our desire to be faithful, to do things excellently, whatever we put our hands to do it with all our might. I think it's important that you land up realizing your limitations as a human and playing to your strengths. And my strengths certainly are single tasking. But again, I'd be interested to hear your own experience with this, and yeah, may God find us faithful.